welcome to the Rime Buddhist Center's Dharma Talk podcast, Achieving Peace Through Compassion. This podcast is a recording of the Dharma Talks given during our Sunday service.
So you have your favorite storyteller in front of you again this morning. I'm just always thankful for the opportunity to speak in front of folks, and especially when it's the dear Sangha. So yeah. All right, y'all. So today we're talking about ultimate bodhicitta, the true nature of reality. And I'd like to start with the question: how do we keep loving each other and our world when the world feels like it's falling apart? And I dare say it's falling apart. Hopefully my talk today will help lead us in the most beneficial direction. We suffer more than we have to when we misunderstand reality. Personally, collectively, politically, spiritually, etc., 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 right? A few of the main reasons that I love practicing here at the Rime Center and being a part of this wonderful Sangha is because we are non-sectarian. We don't cling to one rigid version. We honor many lineages, many voices, many paths towards awakening. And I think some folks may feel confused by that. I don't know about y'all, but I think as humans, we tend to want everything to fit into perfect little pretty boxes, right? I'd say there's a deep wisdom within non-sectarianism because reality itself refuses boxes, right? Reality is interdependent, fluid, and relational. And ultimate bodhicitta asks us to see that clearly, not just intellectually, but in how we treat each other and walk this earthly ground. Khentrul Lodro Thaye speaks about ultimate bodhicitta being a wisdom that is inseparable from compassion. It is the realization that nothing exists independently. Nothing exists permanently. Nothing exists exactly the way that our conditioned minds assume. Everything arises from causes and conditions. Everything. Your joy, your trauma, your politics, your identity, your anger, and even your sense of self. And when we really see that, compassion stops being optional and it becomes inevitable because separation begins to dissolve. So I brought this rose yesterday and it smells so sweet. I would encourage you guys to take a pass and smell it after this service this morning. And we can agree that this is a rose, right? I think we all would see that and say, yeah, that's a rose. So I went to the store last night and I asked the lady, I said, do you guys sell any single roses? And she said yes, and she took me to where they were. She knew exactly what I was asking for, right? There was no confusion. She wasn't like, rose? What is this rose? But there are many conditions that had to come together for us to be sitting here right now looking at this rose, right? And calling it such. So let's make a list of the parts of this particular rose and in no particular order. And I want to also include how it actually arrived here in front of us. So I'm just going to list them out. Dirt, water, seed, sunshine, time, clouds, wind, patience, protection, roots, stem, petals, love, care, the gardener's hands, his or her history and abilities or lack thereof, scissors, a vehicle to bring it to the store, eyes to perceive it, a nose to smell it, a bucket of water to hold it and nourish it while it was at the store, artificial light at the store, cash to purchase it, my hands and feet to carry it out to my vehicle and then into my home and then into this vase. My eyes and your eyes to be able to view it, our awareness of its physical form, the letters of our alphabet that when we put them together, they spell ROSE. I mean, we get the point, right? That a whole lot of things had to happen in order for this phenomena to exist in front of us right now. That's amazing, right? And that was a short list. I could have kept going all day. And so now, where is this rose, right? Because rose is just a label, a useful one, yes, but not an independent essence. And Sangha, we do this constantly to ourselves. We say things like, I'm broken, I'm strong, I'm spiritual, I'm a failure, I'm healed. But you are not a fixed identity. You are an unfolding process, a constantly unfolding process. Conditions moving, both coming and going at all times. And when we forget that, we imprison ourselves. When people believe that identities are fixed, compassion shrinks, judgment grows, violence becomes easier. And this is how societies harden. This is how communities fracture. And this is how we stop seeing each other as human. Ultimate Bodhicitta interrupts that. It says, nothing is solid enough to justify a forever hatred, right? Nothing. So I want to tell a story. And I texted Lama Matt last night and I was like, oh my God, you planted this seed on Wednesday and I'm going to put it in the Dharma talk. So I need you to make sure you watch the Dharma talk, right? Okay, so this past Wednesday night, I was on my way here and I stopped at a gas station to grab a drink. And Travis knows this story because he watched me walk in crying. So I stopped at the gas station to get a drink. And as I pulled up, there was an elderly woman standing hunched over in my headlights. So I stepped out of my truck and I could then hear that she was crying. I'm not talking about just like whimpering, like all out, loud, everybody in the parking lot could hear her, right? And then she was saying, things like, Jesus, I need you, stuff like that, right? So I tried to just put my head down and walk into the gas station and talking to myself like, Tasjha, every struggle is not yours to take on, right? In my head, I was like, mind your business, just go get what you came here to get and keep it moving. Plus, I was leading meditation that night. So I was like, you got somewhere to be. You cannot be late, right? But of course, once my sensitive heart witnessed it, I was no longer able to unwitness it, right? So I'm in the gas station grabbing a Coke, and the whole time I'm thinking, you're going to have to pass her again as you leave because she's right in front of your truck. So I'm at the counter checking out, and I tell the clerk, hey, there's a homeless woman outside who is really crying, and she seems to really be struggling quite a bit. And I know this clerk because this is the gas station by my house, so I go to it almost every day. And the clerk, even being the kind person I know her to be, said quietly under her breath to make sure that no other customers heard her, it's probably just a scam. And there was a part of me that wanted to agree with that. Someplace deep inside of me was a voice that said, don't fall for it, right? So I go back outside, and this time the lady looks up and stops me with slobber and snot dripping from her face, and she asks for any money. She said she hadn't eaten in 3 days, and that they weren't giving her money. She just kept saying, they're not giving me my money. And when I called them, they never help, right? And from my career as a social worker for 20 years, having heard similar stories like that 1,000 times, I assumed she was talking about social services or social security, something like that. Agencies that are damn near impossible to navigate for anybody, let alone a homeless woman, right? So I have $6 cash on me and I give it to her. And she says, thank you. And she continues talking and going on about all of her suffering and how nobody cares for her and how she just might as well die, right? And I'm standing there, not because there was anything I could do, right? But because she needed a human to be with her, right? Y'all, I see heads nodding and y'all gonna make me cry. And so I think to myself, I am witnessing suffering. Like right now, like right here in front of me, this is actual suffering, right? And so as I'm standing there with her and she's crying and she's gotten even louder and she's grabbed more people's attention, several people started coming out of the gas station and were handing her food and water and had made a little bit of change inside the store. And they were all just, it was literally like a line of people to the point where I thought we were in their way. So I was beginning to kind of slide away to let people pass. And they were like, no, like, we want to give this to her. Britt, stop it. And so eventually another woman came and kind of tapped in and took my place so that I could leave. And so I get here for the 7 p.m. meditation and I walk in having obviously been crying the whole drive here because hello, it's me, right? Crying is, I think that's a sport. Do that and I take first place. But but so I come in and I tell Lama Matt and the other folks who are in the shrine room, I tell them the story. And I start the story by saying, I just came into close contact with very deep suffering, right? And then as I finish this side story, Lama Matt, so casually and without even any eye contact, he didn't even look at me because he was putting Losar cards, together. And so he's just doing his work diligently. And he says this, he says, oh, wow, you didn't just witness suffering. You witnessed compassion too. That was like a truth. It really was quite a stark realization. I was like, oh my God, I did. Why did I only focus in on the suffering, right? And so anyway, that shifted my perception completely, but I didn't realize it on Wednesday. I realized it yesterday as I was preparing for the Dharma talk. I was like, oh my God, I have to include that story, right? And so as a social worker for 20 years, I'm also an Army veteran, a domestic violence and sexual assault survivor, and yada, 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 right? The list can keep going, right? I've always been trained to scan for danger, right? To see what hurts, right? Because activism trains you to scan for injustice. And single parenthood has trained me to scan for problems, right? All necessary, but all incomplete, right? Because ultimate bodhicitta says, see the whole field, right? Not just one segment, not just the suffering, right? The compassion that was there too. And so compassion is already arising, even inside of broken systems. And if compassion is arising, liberation is not theoretical, right? It's already happening right here, right? Everywhere we look, it's already happening. It's already taking place. So another story, my son Nigel works part-time. He's 18 years old and he doesn't have a car yet because his single mama can't build enough money up to be able to get him one. And he's not working enough hours to really be able to save. And so he recently asked me just out of the blue, he was like, Mom, do you ever need gas money? Because I never tell him, I never say, let me get $10 on gas because I've been taking you back and forth to work all week. And so he said, do you ever need gas money? And, to be honest, life has been financially tight for quite some time. And I only received disability income from my PTSD from the military. And so, but I'm also an entrepreneur with the business that's still not off the ground yet, right? Single mother, say no more, right? Trying to build something meaningful while raising my two young sirs, because that's what I call them, right? So yes, sometimes it's hard. It can be real hard, right? But what touched me wasn't the money that he offered me, right? It was his tenderness, right? I feel the tears. Because teenagers are not famous for tenderness towards their parents, right? Right? And so there it was. Conditions that produced that moment, right? Honesty, conflict, trust, relationship, time, right? Compassion didn't appear magically, it arose interdependently, right? That's ultimate bodhicitta in everyday life. Yesterday, I was on Facebook for like 3 minutes when an old video of my kids popped up as like a previous post, you know how they give you your memories and stuff. And it was actually from 10 years earlier. And that means my eldest son was 8 and his little brother Silas was 1. Little bodies, light voices, little laughter. And instantly grief hit me. And I thought, oh my God, that's gone. That time is over. And I cried, y'all, for like, it was a second video and it was just on loop. And I watched it like 20 times. And the whole time I'm watching it, I'm just sobbing. I'm like, oh, my babies, you know, because they have those cute little voices and, you know, the whole thing. Right. And so then I was like, oh my God, it was a lightning strike because I instantly remembered what Lama Matt had said. And so as I'm watching this, I realized that there was not only grief and sadness right there, right? There was also great joy. And I was like, oh my God, Facebook gave me this video. I wouldn't have went looking for this video. I had actually forgotten that memory. So it was like, thank you, Facebook. Only for that, not for nothing else. Keep all that other stuff. But so it was like the same memory that I was crying about, you know, 3 minutes before. And because I had the realization, like, oh my God, I don't have to only be sad. I could be joyful that I was there to witness that, right? To be there when those babies were that small, you know? And so I instantly had a different relationship to it. And I noticed in the moment how I just lifted. I was like, look at these boys. And it was just so much joy in that moment. And so, you know, for me, that's like an experience of emptiness because it's not denial. It was more like expansion and the perception expanded, suffering softened. Right. So some of us might be old enough to remember those choose your own adventure books. Right. Y'all remember those? If you go through the door, turn to page 42. If you walk to the woods, turn to page 71 kind of thing, right? Life is like that. And so in relative reality, ills exist, bodies age, history matters, consequences are real, right? Ultimate reality, meaning is not fixed, identity is not fixed. And compassion is always available. And activism without compassion burns out. Spirituality without engagement floats away, right? Ultimate bodhicitta integrates both. I had a moment recently where stress over groceries turned into conflict with my eldest son. And, you know, I said some things that I wish I wouldn't have said. He said some things that I wish wouldn't have came out of his mouth, you know. But then later on that night, I went into his room to apologize for my poor behavior. And I was surprised that I found him crying, not about groceries, but about the world, about the violence, about religion being weaponized, and instability. And I realized there was existential overwhelm that he was feeling. And so, with my training as a social worker and a mental health crisis worker, I knew that I needed to lower my energy, right? I needed to slow down my own breathing, right? And I just listened. And he, his first sort of reaction to me was like, get out of here, leave me alone, really kind of, angry with me. And I just sat down. I didn't even say anything. I just sat down. He kept saying, get out of here. And I said, son, I'm just going to be right here. I'm going to be quiet. I'm not going to say nothing. I'm not going to lecture like the mama that loves to lecture, right? I always have a lecture ready. And I just sat and I realized that I had to keep myself in check, right? Because I couldn't hold space for his suffering if I also began to suffer with him, right? Especially not outwardly suffering. Like, of course, in my mind, I'm like, oh my gosh, but outwardly, I had to maintain some resemblance of being stoic, right? And being strong for him. But that's bodhicitta too. Not fixing, just presence, right? Here's the metaphor that keeps coming to me as of lately. Life is an ocean. Exploration of that ocean is necessary. Danger does exist. Compassion is the lifeline. We don't forbid the ocean, right? We don't shame the swimmers. We just hold the rope. That's Sangha. That's why centers like this exist and are so deeply important, right? Because we're not looking for perfection. We're looking for support, right? For years, I've been in and out of therapy. And I once had a therapist who said, anger isn't evil in and of itself, right? It's protective. When we treat parts of ourselves with compassion instead of rejection, healing accelerates. And healed people can create healing communities. This is social transformation from the inside out. And this is difficult, right? But it is essential for us to recognize that even people who cause harm are shaped by conditions. Understanding that does not excuse harm, and hatred actually hardens us. And hardened hearts cannot liberate the world. Compassion keeps transformation possible, and that is the Bodhisattva path. So to get back to the story of my eldest son asking me if I needed money, later I told him, I was like, keep your money, son, because I recognized that his willingness mattered more than the money, right? Because bodhicitta begins with the desire to care, the willingness to soften, the courage to stay open, because everything grows from that. So, my dear Sangha, I'm going to leave you with a couple of questions. Where are you only seeing suffering when compassion is also present? I think we need to train our vision to be wider. Where are you clinging to a fixed story about yourself because you're not a finished product? Who needs you to hold the lifeline right now? Not fixing, but helping to stabilize. Not judging, but just being present. Because ultimate bodhicitta is not just this abstract philosophy, right? It is a teenager offering gas money. It's strangers feeding a crying woman. It's memories transforming grief into gratitude. It's communities choosing compassion despite fear. Reality is fluid. Compassion is possible. Liberation is collective. We cannot do it by ourselves. And I want you to just hear this as I close out this Dharma talk. If compassion is already arising in this world, then despair is not the final truth, right? I just want us to rest there for a second. If compassion is already arising in this world, then despair is not the final truth. So keep practicing. Keep questioning fixed stories. Keep loving anyway, because that's how awakening actually moves through communities. Not perfectly, but persistently and together. Thank you, dear Sangha.
Thank you for listening to the Rime Buddhist Center's Dharma Talk podcast. Music was provided by Barefoot Bran Music. Please consider supporting the Rime Buddhist Center by making a donation at our website at www.rimecenter.org/donate.